Okay. And I'm also going to try something really fancy here. Okay, that seemed to work out pretty good. The only person I can see right now, oh shucks. Actually, Anne, would you turn, thank you. You're the only person I can see for whatever reason. Is my audio okay? You can hear me all right? Yeah, okay, good. So we're talking once again about mindfulness, the 7th of the 8 steps on the Eightfold Path. And last week, or 2 weeks ago now, we began looking at that aspect of it. And we spent some time both with Thich Nhat Hanh and also with Bhante Gunaratana's take on that step on the path. One of the things that I talked about that evening were Thich Nhat Hanh's 7 miracles of mindfulness. And I think they're worth repeating. If I had a way of screen sharing, I'd do it, but I don't. You may recall that Thich Nhat Hanh did not begin with the fairly usual, mindfulness being seeing things as they are without the distortions, not trying to have them be different than they are, a position of acceptance, seeing things clearly, so on. But rather spoke to mindfulness as an aspect of the path that sits centrally and from which everything else which everything else connects. He began that with saying that you may remember that meditation, our sitting practice we just did, calm abiding meditation, is a power plant for mindfulness, is the way he put it, that we, in that practice, cultivate the capacity to allow things to be as they are and to see them increasingly clearly. So our sitting practice drives our mindfulness, which then is that which, as he says, the plow hoe and the irrigation source that waters inside. And then he goes on to say, right mindfulness accepts everything without judging or reacting. That sounds much like your sort of typical mindfulness definition. And then he adds, it is inclusive and loving. The reason I repeat all that is that he takes this aspect of our practice, if you want to put it that way, and starts with sitting meditation and the mindfulness that's involved, and ends up moving through all the other noble truths that are present when right mindfulness is, and then this complete acceptance and this inclusiveness. And loving. And as I mentioned, when he says loving, he's talking about the great love of the Brahma Viharas. He's talking about the practice of loving kindness toward all beings, the practice of compassion, that is, seeing suffering and wanting and doing everything that one might be able to help relieve that suffering. He's talking about joy, particularly the joy that might arise as we see the joy of someone who is, for example, going, oh, with their understanding and the easing of the pain they might experience as they are do the practice. And also equanimity, which can mean both that even balance of seeing things as they are without making distinctions, and also seeing all beings in that way, as loving them inclusively and equally, which is not to say we don't have relationships with our families and friends that are different than our relationships with people we see only in passing. But the inclusivity of knowing that we all are the same in terms of having this Buddha mind, this open, expansive knowing that we just spoke to in our sitting meditation, and that we all also have any number of difficulties and distortions and so forth that we bring to how we see things based on our own causes and conditions, that everyone has both those things. And in that way, we become inclusive. And just very briefly, those 7 miracles of mindfulness, that first one being to be present. I am here, I'm able to see what and experience what is here with me. The second miracle of making the other one also present. Here's our child before us. I'm there with the child. I am here. The child is here, or your dearly beloved one. I'm here, darling. You are here also. And for me, there's always that, and it won't always be this way. This is how it is right now. That's part of the awareness. Part of mindfulness is knowing impermanence. So as lovely as that might be, that other aspect is certainly there. The third miracle being to nourish the object of your attention, to investigate, to be present to love. And the fourth miracle is to see the difficulty of the suffering in the other and saying, I'm here for you. That's certainly not usually a part of the way people describe mindfulness. The fifth aspect is the capacity for deep looking that mindfulness allows. Because of the calm, concentrated evenness of mindfulness, you're able to shine the light on whatever it might be that's the object of your attention, which might be the investigation of impermanence or the investigation of a self or whatever it might be, and also on that which is investigating. Both those things are illuminated by mindfulness. Where one begins and the other ends becomes increasingly difficult to parse out. The sixth miracle is the understanding. We touch deeply the present moment, as he would say. We see, we listen. And as we do that, our understanding deepens. We are more able to see the causes and conditions of things that we don't like, and we're able to see the causes and conditions of the things that we do like, and we're able to see the impermanence in both of those things. That understanding grows stronger and stronger. And the seventh miracle is the transformation that occurs as we practice in that way, the transformation of our own suffering into a deep understanding and a deep compassion. So that's what we talked about last time. And tonight, as I mentioned last time, we'll go ahead and hear from Gil Frondal from his book, Steps to Liberation, the Buddha's Eightfold Path. So I think I'm going to actually read a little bit from that chapter. I know that many of you may have already read it, but sometimes it's never bad to hear it again. And sometimes hearing the words as well as seeing the words can be of value. So here's what he says. The first is a quote. The quote starts, "What is right mindfulness? Here, a practitioner abides, focused on the body in itself, on feeling tones in themselves, on mental states in themselves, and on mental processes in themselves, ardent, clearly comprehending and mindful, having put away greed and distress for the world." That's from the Buddha's middle-length discourse. So, boy, there's a lot wrapped up in that little paragraph. And continuing reading now with Gil Frondal's words, when the steps of the Eightfold Path are practiced sequentially, from right view to right concentration. The journey of practice goes inward to the most intimate parts of our being. Right view and right intention provide the broad understanding for walking the path. Right speech, right action, and right livelihood bring the practice home to our behavior in the world. Right effort or diligence, right mindfulness, and right concentration take the practice into our heart, to our innermost capacity to experience peace and ease. Right mindfulness is more than simply being mindful. Interesting to put it that way. In the Buddha's ancient instructions, sati, the word often rendered into English as mindfulness, refers to the presence of mind needed for strong, balanced awareness. Mindfulness practice occurs when this presence of mind is combined with clear comprehension. And in fact, he's echoing the Buddha's words. The focus on the mental states in themselves and on mental processes in themselves, and one is ardent, clearly comprehending and mindful. So comprehension becomes a part of the practice of mindfulness, as does ardency and a willingness to put aside preoccupations with things of the world. When this mindfulness practice is directed toward the four foundations of mindfulness, it is known as right mindfulness. He's going to get into that momentarily. Clear comprehension, he says, lies at the center of mindfulness practice. Whereas mindfulness allows us to be aware, clear comprehension understands whatever it is we're aware of. Because it's difficult to have clear understanding when we're in the grip of greed or distress, the instruction for mindfulness practice is to put these aside. Not always so easy to do, but that's part of mind training, is how do you do that? When this is difficult to do, he continues, the practice requires us to at least let go of focusing on the thing we want or that distresses us. Instead, we begin tracking what is happening in our body, feeling tones, and mind in the face of our own greed or distress. So there's the shift here, whatever the greed may be manifesting as, and we bring our attention into these four foundations of mindfulness. Traditionally, right mindfulness involves attention to four progressively more refined and intimate areas of our lives. These four, usually called the four foundations of mindfulness, are the body, feeling tones, mental states, and mental processes. And this evening in our meditation, I touched on all four of those areas before we actually did our shamatha practice. That we really checked in with all of those things, that we were present to the body in the body. That is, not thinking about the body, but present to the experience of the body just as it is now. And in a similar way to the feeling tones that may have been present and may have been changing, coming and going, and to our state of mind, our general broad state of mind, as well as the mental processes, sometimes referred to as the dharmas or mental phenomena, that occupy so much of our attention. The journey begins with establishing mindfulness of the body, including our breathing, physical activities, and physical sensations. After focusing on the body, we then establish mindfulness of the simple feeling tones of our direct present moment experiences. And I'll go ahead and say a word about that. or he does. I'll continue reading here. The feeling tones are the most basic way we experience sensations as either pleasant, unpleasant, or neither pleasant nor unpleasant. As these tones come into focus, it is possible to distinguish those that arise due to our contact with the outside world from those independent of the world, which arise based on what is happening in our mind and heart. So, for example, sensations of sight, sound, smell, taste, and touch arise from contact with the sense world. Buddhism includes as part of this the inner experiences that only have a physical source. Distinct from this are the sensations that do not arise from the stimulation of our five senses. The sensations that do not arise from the stimulation of our five senses. They are sensations associated with mental states or moods, can occur independent of what is happening in our immediate environment. Meditation, for example, can produce pleasant sensations that have nothing to do with the sense world, and yet we sense them. In fact, it is possible to experience unpleasant physical sensations simultaneously with having the pleasure of meditative joy. As an aside, there are a couple of sutras. There is the Satipatthana Sutra, which is the 4 foundations of mindfulness that we spent that year with using Goldstein's book. And those 4 foundations are what we're talking about right now. You hear the word sati, mindfulness, and patthana, the 4 foundations of mindfulness. Another sort of companion sutra is the Anapanasati Sutta. Anapanasati is in-breath, out-breath awareness. Sounds pretty simple. So this is a sutra that is called the in-breath, out-breath awareness sutra, but moves all the way from awareness of the breath to some of these states in which one experiences joy and rapture and bliss, and then even beyond that into experiences that don't really have any physical aspect to them. And some of the meditative experiences of the deeper states of concentration are, in fact, extremely pleasant and have nothing to do with anything happening in the phenomenal world outside. So, end of aside. Let's see, I'm going to skip ahead a little bit. Well, maybe I won't. Being mindful of the distinction between experiences that arise from stimulation of our physical senses from those that arise from our mental states leads to a greater awareness of our mental states. So these things are no longer all blurring together. We're saying, oh, this is mindfulness. Now I'm talking about mindfulness of mind. What's happening there? Which is the 3rd foundation of mindfulness. Here, what is meant by a mental state is the overall mood or attitude of the mind. And it gets a little, can be sometimes less than clear. We have our pleasant, unpleasant, neutral, and we have moods and we have attitudes, and where one is and the other. It takes some deep looking to begin to differentiate. But this 3rd state, the overall mood or attitude, refers to the overall emotional state of the mind. So he uses the word emotion there, as well as the way the mind can feel. Contracted, expansive, caught up and tight, free. And it's worth being aware of that aspect, that foundation of mindfulness, because to check in on it in ourselves can be very useful. If we say, how's my mind? And it goes to, oh, I'm thinking about this, or I'm agitated or frustrated about that. we've gone away from this, which can be an important aspect of really seeing where we are. Oh, my mind is constricted. I can feel it tighten down. And it may relate to something that's going on. Or it may be that, oh, what's my mental state right now? I'm totally at ease and open to what is present in me and around me without any need to have it be different than it is. That's a very different attitude of the mind. And checking on that, where are we with that throughout the day, can be a helpful practice. With greater awareness of mental states, the journey of mindfulness leads to the fourth foundation of mindfulness. This is where we have a clear recognition of the mental processes operating in relation to our mental states. This last foundation involves cultivating wisdom about what our minds do to cause suffering and what we can do to overcome this suffering. So first we have the foundation of the mindfulness. What are the phenomena of mind that are arising in me? And then we have mindfulness acting as, is this wholesome, unwholesome? And we have diligence coming in and saying, is this something that we want to cultivate and have continued to be present or make even larger? Or is this something we're seeing that might be destructive, that we need to do some investigation of, or that we need to shift in some way, transform in some way? So we become aware of what's happening along with this clarifying of that aspect of it. Is this moving to suffering, or is this moving away from suffering? We come to recognize the mental processes, such as the hindrances. You may recall we talked about the hindrances that need to be let go of so we can realize a peaceful heart. When he talked earlier about that mindful state being free of the grasping, the wanting, or the aversion, that's what he's talking about. And as we begin to look at concentration, that process temporarily can help considerably with that in the meditative process, but later for that. So we recognize the mental processes, such as hindrances, that need to be let go of, so we can realize a peaceful heart. Again, this is the mindfulness of mind that we keep talking about all the time. I mean, it comes up all the time. This, aha, I can see now that this sense of irritation or frustration is arising in me. It's causing suffering. We recognize the process. This is a hindrance in some way. What can I do in this situation to realize a more peaceful heart? But the first aspect of it, of course, is recognizing that it's there and that mindfulness is there, and that process of diligence and sorting things out is also there. It also includes recognizing and cultivating the 7 mental processes that support the mind to be expansive, tranquil, and liberated. The 7 factors of awakening. He doesn't use those words, but he goes through them. The first one is mindfulness. And what supports all the others. We've also talked about these fairly recently, you may recall. The second one is investigation. I'm seeing Thich Nhat on there. So I am present, you are present. I want to be curious. I want to see what's happening. I'm looking with deep looking inside myself. I'm curious. What's going on here? I want to investigate these things. There's mindfulness, investigation, energy, bringing some enthusiasm to the practice, joy, tranquility. Here comes concentration again, and equanimity. Those are the 7 factors of awakening. The last foundation, we're back now to the last foundation of the 4 foundations of mindfulness, also includes having a clear and direct knowing of the 4 noble truths as insights that lead to liberation. And, you know, in some ways that goes back to that first step, the step of the view, and what that has to do with being aware of and understanding the 4 noble truths and how they work in our own lives very intimately. So that is Gil Frondal's take on the mindfulness step. If you have his book, as always, he has these practices and reflections, body, feeling tones, mental states, and mental processes. Oh, I highlighted one of those in the third one, the practicing mindfulness of mental states. The third aspect is to notice where your state of mind fits on a spectrum, from expanded, light, and open to contracted, heavy, and closed, which is a lovely idea. You know, it isn't necessarily one or the other. It's where am I right now with that? And it's, you know, it's not a switch. So to be aware that, you know, both these aspects are going to be here and we're going to be someplace on the spectrum, I think is a nice take. So that is where I will stop. And I will see if I can stop recording.